What if the most beautiful day of your life was used as a weapon to destroy you? Imagine a grand ballroom filled with 100 of the city's elite, all eyes on one man, a charismatic millionaire on the verge of a life-changing announcement. But this isn't a celebration of his success. It's the stage for a shocking betrayal. He's about to propose to his mistress in front of everyone. But he's forgotten one crucial detail. His pregnant wife is in the audience, and she's holding a secret that will turn his triumphant moment into a public spectacle of ruin. Stay with us as we unravel a story of love lies and a revenge so perfectly orchestrated it will leave you breathless. The lie was a gilded car, and Julian Thorne was both its prisoner and its architect. To the world, he was the golden boy of the tech industry, the visionary CEO of Nexus Innovations, a company that had revolutionized the way people connected. His life was a curated masterpiece of success, a sprawling penthouse overlooking the city, a collection of vintage cars that would make any collector weep, and a wife who was the epitome of grace and beauty, Amelia. Amelia Thorne was more than just a pretty face on Julian's arm. She was an accomplished art curator, her gallery a sanctuary of emerging talent in a city obsessed with the established. Her intelligence was as sharp as her wit, her heart as expansive as the canvases she so adored. She was the calm to his storm, the anchor to his soaring ambition. And she was pregnant with their first child, a secret they had been cherishing, a new chapter they were about to write together in the beautiful story of their lives. Or so she thought. In the weeks leading up to the Nexus Innovations 10th anniversary gala, Julian had been a different man. He was more attentive, more affectionate than he had been in months. He would come home early, bearing bouquets of Amelia's favorite peonies, his eyes filled with a tenderness that melted away the subtle anxieties that had begun to creep into her heart. He'd talk about the baby, his voice thick with emotion, his hand resting on her burgeoning belly, as if to protect their unborn child from the world. Amelia, ever the optimist, had allowed herself to believe that this was a new beginning, that the distance she had felt growing between them was just a product of his work stress. She had no idea that his renewed affection was nothing more than a carefully constructed facade, a final act of deception before the curtain fell on their marriage. The truth was, Julian was leading a double life, a life that revolved around Isabella Rossi. Isabella was a force of nature, a fiery Italian beauty with ambition that burned as brightly as her emerald eyes. A rising star in the world of fashion, blogging her social media, was a carefully curated fantasy of glamour and luxury, a life she was determined to make her own. She had met Julian at a tech conference a year ago, and their connection had been instant electric and utterly forbidden. To Isabella, Julian was not just a married man. He was a stepping stone, a golden ticket to the life she so desperately craved. She had convinced herself that their love was real, a passionate affair that eclipsed the staid, comfortable marriage he had with Amelia. She saw Amelia as a relic of Julian's past, a woman who couldn't possibly understand the depths of his ambition, the fire in his soul. Isabella was the future, and she was tired of waiting in the wings. The plan had been hatched in the hushed intimacy of a 5-star hotel suite, a place that had become their sanctuary. It was Isabella's idea, a bold, audacious move that would leave no room for retreat. "You need to choose Julian," she had whispered, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "You can't have both. It's time to show the world who you really love. Propose to me at the gala, in front of everyone. Let them see that I am the one you choose." Julian, a man who had built an empire on calculated risks, was initially hesitant. The scandal would be enormous, the fallout unpredictable. But Isabella's words had tapped into a deep-seated insecurity. He harbored a fear of being ordinary. He had always been a man who took what he wanted, and he wanted Isabella. He wanted the thrill, the passion, the validation she offered. He had convinced himself that a clean break, however brutal, was the only way. He would be seen as a man of decisive action, a man who followed his heart no matter the cost. He would be free. So the stage was set for a public execution of his marriage. The Nexus Innovations 10th Anniversary Gala, to be held at the opulent Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, was the chosen venue. The guest list was a who's who of the global tech and finance industries. The media would be there in full force. It was the perfect platform for Julian to unveil his new life with Isabella by his side. A few days before the gala, Julian presented Amelia with a stunning diamond necklace. "A little something to celebrate us," he had said, his voice a smooth, practiced lie, "for being the most patient, loving wife a man could ask for, and for carrying our child." Amelia, her heart swelling with love, had thrown her arms around him, burying her face in his neck, inhaling the familiar scent of his cologne. A scent she had always associated with home, with safety. She was completely oblivious to the fact that in a velvet box, tucked away in his safe, lay another diamond. A diamond of staggering size and brilliance, a diamond that would soon be placed on another woman's finger. The legendary Winston Blue Diamond, a gem as deep and blue as the ocean of lies he was about to drown her in. Amelia had her own surprise planned for the gala. She had spent weeks secretly compiling a video montage of their life together. It was a love letter in moving pictures, their first date, their trip to Tuscany, their wedding day. The highlight was a clip from their wedding vows. Julian's voice, thick with unshed tears, promising to love and cherish her for all eternity. She had intended to have it played as a surprise for him, during her toast, a public declaration of her love and excitement for their growing family. She had no idea that her beautiful, heartfelt gift would become her weapon of choice in a war she didn't even know she was fighting. As Amelia packed for their trip to Singapore, she hummed a soft tune, her hand resting on her belly. She felt a flutter, a gentle kick from the new life growing inside her. She smiled. Everything was perfect. She was living in a gilded cage, but she was yet to see the bars. The door was about to be flung open, not to freedom, but to a devastating truth that would shatter her world into a million pieces. The storm was gathering, and she was standing right in its eye, blissfully unaware of the destruction that was about to be unleashed. The grand ballroom of the Marina Bay Sands was a spectacle of breathtaking opulence. Crystal chandeliers like frozen waterfalls hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a galaxy of light upon the sea of guests below. The air hummed with the symphony of clinking champagne flutes, hushed conversations, and the gentle strains of a string quartet. The elite of the global tech world were all there, dressed in their finest, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of success. This was Julian Thorne's kingdom, and tonight he was its undisputed king. Amelia, radiant in a bespoke midnight blue gown that draped elegantly over her pregnant form, moved through the crowd with an easy grace. The diamond necklace Julian had given her sparkled at her throat, a cold, beautiful lie against her warm skin. She greeted friends and acquaintances, her smile genuine, her heart full of a quiet joy. She felt a surge of pride for Julian, for the empire he had built from the ground up. She was his partner in every sense of the word, his confidant, his biggest supporter. Tonight was a celebration of their shared journey, their shared success. Julian was in his element, a charismatic whirlwind of handshakes and charming smiles. He moved from one influential guest to another, his words as smooth as the vintage champagne he sipped. But beneath the polished veneer of the successful CEO, a current of nervous energy crackled. His eyes would occasionally flit towards the entrance, a flicker of anticipation, of dread in their depths. Amelia, ever attuned to his moods, noticed his restlessness. "Everything all right, my love?" she asked, her hand finding his. "You seem a little on edge." Julian turned to her, his smile a masterpiece of deception. "Just the usual pre-speech jitters," he lied, squeezing her hand. 10 years. It's a big milestone. I want everything to be perfect." He leaned in and kissed her, a brief, almost perfunctory gesture that felt more like a performance for the benefit of those watching than a genuine expression of affection. "You look breathtaking tonight, Amelia," he murmured, his eyes holding hers for a fraction of a second too long. A flicker of something unreadable in their depths. It could have been guilt, or perhaps a final fleeting moment of regret. Amelia, reassured, smiled back at him. "You'll be brilliant, as always." A short while later, Isabella Rossi made her entrance. She was a vision in crimson, a stark, dramatic contrast to the cool blues and silvers that dominated the ballroom. Her dress was a daring, figure-hugging creation that announced her arrival with an unapologetic confidence. Heads turned, whispers followed in her wake. She was a woman who commanded attention, and tonight she was determined to hold it. She caught Julian's eye from across the room, a slow, predatory smile gracing her lips. It was a look of shared conspiracy of imminent victory. Amelia, her back to the entrance, as she chatted with the wife of a Japanese investor, missed the silent exchange entirely. The moment came after the main course had been cleared. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight found Julian as he ascended the stage. A hush fell over the ballroom. He stood at the podium, the Nexus Innovations logo glowing on the massive screen behind him. He looked out at the sea of faces, a confident smile playing on his lips. He began his speech with a walk down memory lane, his voice resonant and captivating. He spoke of the early days of Nexus Innovations, the struggles, the breakthroughs, the relentless pursuit of a dream. He was a master storyteller, weaving a narrative of innovation and perseverance that had the audience hanging on his every word. He paid tribute to his team, his investors, his partners. It was a flawless performance, the speech of a visionary leader at the pinnacle of his success. Amelia watched him from her table at the front, her heart swelling with pride. She clutched the small USB drive in her purse, the wedding video she had so lovingly prepared. She couldn't wait to see the look on his face when she played it. Then Julian's tone shifted. "Success," he said, his voice taking on a more personal, more intimate quality, "is not just about building a company. It's about building a life. It's about finding that one person who understands you, who challenges you, who inspires you to be the best version of yourself." Amelia smiled, thinking he was about to pay tribute to her, to their marriage. Her hand instinctively went to her belly. "For a long time," Julian continued, his eyes scanning the crowd, "I thought I had that. I thought I knew what happiness was. But life has a funny way of surprising you. It throws you a curveball when you least expect it, and you realize that everything you thought you knew, everything you thought you wanted, was wrong." A ripple of confusion went through the audience. This was not the typical corporate speech. Amelia's smile faltered. A cold knot of dread began to form in the pit of her stomach. This was not the script she had imagined. "Tonight," Julian declared, his voice ringing with a newfound conviction. "I want to be honest. I want to be true to myself and to my heart. There is someone in this room who has changed my life in ways I never thought possible. Someone who has shown me what true passion, what true love really is." He paused, letting the suspense build. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, thick with a palpable tension. Amelia's heart was pounding in her chest, a frantic, desperate drumbeat against her ribs. She looked around, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. And then she saw her. Isabella Rossi standing near the stage, her eyes locked on Julian, her expression a mixture of triumph and anticipation. "Isabella." Julian set his voice soft, but carrying to every corner of the room. "Isabella Rossi, would you please join me on stage?" A collective gasp went through the crowd. Whispers erupted like wildfire. All eyes turned to Isabella as she glided towards the stage, her crimson dress a slash of defiance against the shocked silence. She took Julian's hand, her smile radiant, triumphant. Julian turned to face her, his back to the massive screen that still bore his company's logo. He ignored the shocked faces in the crowd, the frantic whispers, the dawning realization on the faces of those who knew he was a married man. He had eyes only for Isabella. "Isabella," he began, his voice thick with a rehearsed emotion. "You are the most incredible woman I have ever met. You are my soulmate, my everything. I know this is sudden, but I can't live another day without you by my side. I want the world to know how much I love you." And then in front of 100 horrified guests, in front of the world's media, Julian Thorne, the celebrated tech millionaire, got down on one knee. He pulled out a velvet box, and from it, he produced a ring that silenced the room. The Winston Blue Diamond. A magnificent pear-shaped gem of an impossible, mesmerizing blue caught the light and shattered it into 1,000 glittering shards. It was a king's ransom on a platinum band. "Isabella Rossi," Julian's voice boomed through the speakers. "Will you marry me?" Time seemed to stop. For a moment, the only sound was the frantic clicking of cameras. Isabella's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with feigned surprise. This was her moment, the culmination of all her plans, all her ambitions. But just as she opened her mouth to say yes, just as the word of her victory was about to be uttered, a flicker on the giant screen behind them stole the attention of every single person in the room. The Nexus Innovations logo dissolved, and in its place, a new image began to form. It was a scene of breathtaking beauty, a sun-drenched vineyard in Tuscany. And in the center of the frame, a younger, happier Julian Thorne looked into the eyes of his bride, Amelia. The wedding video began to play silent at first, a ghost of a memory flickering to life on the giant screen. The image was jarringly intimate in the vast, opulent ballroom. There was Julian, his face unguarded, his eyes shining with an adoration that was achingly real. He was looking at Amelia, resplendent in a lace wedding gown, her smile a beacon of pure, unadulterated joy. The scene was from their wedding day 4 years prior, a day that now felt like a lifetime ago. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Julian, still on one knee, froze. He looked up at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. Isabella, her triumphant smile faltering, followed his gaze. The blood drained from her face. This was not part of the plan. Then the audio kicked in. Julian's voice, younger, more earnest, filled the silent ballroom. It was his wedding speech, a torrent of heartfelt promises and poetic declarations of love. "They say that every man dreams of a moment like this," his voice echoed. "A moment where everything falls into place, where you look at someone and you just know. You know that you've found your other half. Looking at Amelia today, I know that for the first time in my life, I am whole." On screen, the younger Julian raised his glass to Amelia. "To my wife," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My beautiful, brilliant, incredible wife. You are my compass, my anchor, my one true north. You are not just the love of my life. You are my life. I promise to spend every day of the rest of my life proving that I am worthy of your love. I promise to cherish you, to honor you, and to love you and only you for all of eternity." The irony was so thick, so suffocating, it was almost comical. The guests sat in stunned silence, their gazes shifting from the romantic spectacle on the screen to the sordid tableau on the stage. There was Julian kneeling before his mistress, the echoes of his eternal vows to his wife ringing in his ears. There was Isabella, her face a thunderous canvas of fury and humiliation. And there at her table near the front was Amelia. She rose to her feet, a vision of ethereal calm in the eye of the storm. The midnight blue of her gown seemed to absorb the chaos around her, her posture regale her expression, unreadable. She was no longer a victim. She was a queen about to reclaim her throne. Every eye in the room was now on her as she began to walk towards the stage. Her steps slow, deliberate, and utterly fearless. The gentle swell of her pregnancy was now unmistakable, a silent, powerful testament to the depth of Julian's betrayal. As she reached the stage, a technician acting on a prearranged signal handed her a microphone. She didn't look at Julian, not yet. She addressed the crowd, her voice as clear and as cold as ice. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady, devoid of any tremor. "I apologize for the interruption. My husband, as you can see, is a man of grand gestures. It seems he has so much love to give, he decided one wife simply wasn't enough." A wave of shocked laughter, quickly stifled, went through the room. Julian scrambled to his feet, his face ashen. "Amelia," he stammered, reaching for her. "What are you doing?" Amelia finally turned her gaze upon him, and for the first time that night, Julian saw his wife. Not the gentle, forgiving Amelia he had taken for granted, but a woman of formidable strength, her eyes blazing with a cold, righteous fury. "What am I doing?" she repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "I'm simply providing a little context, Julian. A little trip down memory lane. I thought your new fiancé," she spat the word like a curse, her eyes flicking to Isabella, "might appreciate knowing the kind of promises you're capable of making. And breaking." She then turned her attention to Isabella, who stood frozen, the magnificent Winston blue diamond on her finger, now feeling like a shackle. "Isabella, isn't it?" Amelia said, her voice dripping with a polite, venomous sweetness. "That's a beautiful ring. The Winston blue. A truly remarkable diamond. Did he tell you its history? It's said to bring its wearer great fortune, but only if the love it represents is true. Otherwise, it's just a very expensive, very beautiful curse." Isabella, for the first time, found her voice. "You have no right," she began, her voice shrill with indignation. "No right." Amelia cut her off, taking a step closer. I am his wife. I am the mother of his unborn child. She let that revelation hang in the air, a bombshell that sent another shockwave through the room. I have every right. You, on the other hand, are a footnote in a story that is about to come to a very abrupt end. Amelia turned back to Julian, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying the weight of a death sentence. Did you really think I wouldn't find out, Julian? Did you think I was that naive, that blind, while you were whispering sweet nothings in her ear? I was at home, feeling our baby kick for the first time. While you were buying her diamonds, I was decorating a nursery. You weren't just cheating on me, Julian. You were cheating on our family. You were cheating on the future you promised us. She paused, taking a deep breath, her composure absolute. This grand romantic gesture, she said, gesturing to the pathetic scene on the stage. It's not about love. It's about your ego, your insatiable need for more. More money, more success, more adoration. You didn't fall in love with her, Julian. You fell in love with a younger, more flattering reflection of yourself. Then she delivered the final devastating blow. And you know what the saddest part is? You've not only destroyed our marriage, our family, you've just destroyed the very empire you're so proud of. Julian stared at her, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He thought this was just about his infidelity, a messy public divorce. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was about to crumble. He had no idea that his wife, the quiet, unassuming art curator, was about to bring his entire world crashing down around him. He had underestimated her. And in the world of high-stakes business and brutal betrayals, underestimating your opponent was a fatal mistake. A cavernous silence descended upon the grand ballroom, a void so absolute it seemed to swallow the music, the whispers, and the very air itself. On the massive screen, the image of a beaming Amelia in her wedding dress faded, replaced by the stark, glowing logo of Nexus Innovations, a silent monument to the lie that had just been exposed. Julian remained on one knee, frozen in a grotesque parody of a romantic proposal. The Winston blue diamond on Isabella's finger, which moments ago had been a symbol of triumphant new love, now felt like a shard of ice, a cold, heavy weight of impending doom. Julian's mind, usually a fortress of strategic calculation, was a maelstrom of chaos. This can't be happening. The thought ricocheted through his skull. It's a prank, a sick, twisted joke. He scrambled to his feet, a jerky, uncoordinated movement that betrayed his panic. He forced a laugh, a harsh, grating sound that echoed unnaturally in the stillness. "Well," he said, his voice straining for a lightness it could not find. "It seems my wife has a flair for the dramatic. A little trip down memory lane, it seems. Very sentimental." He turned to the audience, his smile a desperate cracking veneer. "But as I was saying, tonight is about the future." His words trailed off into nothingness. No one was listening. Every single eye in that room, from the powerful venture capitalists at the front tables to the service staff lingering by the walls, was fixed on the woman walking toward the stage. Amelia moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a tidal wave, gathering its strength before it crashes ashore. She was no longer the heartbroken wife. She was an avenging angel, her face a mask of serene, chilling composure. The microphone was in her hand, and as she stepped into the spotlight, she seemed to draw all the light in the room, leaving Julian and Isabella in a sudden, cold shadow. "Good evening, everyone." Her voice, amplified by the speakers, was calm and clear, yet it cut through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. "I do apologize for the interruption. My husband, Julian Thorne, as you can see, is a man of grand gestures. It seems he has so much love to give." She paused, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. He decided one wife simply wasn't enough. A few shocked gasps, followed by a ripple of nervous, incredulous laughter, broke the tension. Julian's face, already pale, turned a ghastly shade of white. This was not a sentimental prank. This was a declaration of war. "Amelia, stop this," he hissed, taking a step towards her. "You're making a scene. We can discuss this at home." Home. Amelia's laugh was a soft, brittle sound, devoid of all warmth. "You mean the house I built? The bed we shared, the nursery I decorated for our child?" "Which home are you referring to, Julian? Because it seems to me you've made your new home in hotel suites and whispered lies." She turned her gaze on Isabella, who stood frozen, her mind racing. "This is a disaster." He promised he had handled her. He promised she was weak. Isabella's instinct was to fight back, to assert her claim. "You have no right to be up here," she snapped, her voice higher and shriller than she intended. "This is our moment." "Your moment." Amelia's eyes, cold and assessing, raked over Isabella from head to toe. "Your moment of what, exactly? Of triumph, of stealing another woman's husband? Let me tell you what this moment is. It's a lesson in the true cost of things." She gestured to the magnificent diamond on Isabella's hand. "That is the Winston Blue. A truly remarkable diamond. Did he tell you its history? It's said to bring its wearer great fortune, but only if the love it represents is true. Otherwise, it's just a very expensive, very beautiful curse. And darling." Amelia leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was nonetheless audible to the front rows. "Looking at you now, I'd say you're thoroughly cursed." Then she turned from the personal to the professional, her focus shifting to the audience, specifically to the tables where the most powerful investors were seated. Her entire demeanor changed. The wronged wife receded, and a formidable new persona emerged, the savvy, aggrieved business partner. "Many of you in this room are investors in Nexus Innovations," she began, her tone now crisp and authoritative. "You invested your capital and your trust in a company you believed to be stable-led by a man you believed to be a visionary. But I ask you, how can you trust a man with your millions, when he cannot even honor the most sacred personal contract of his life?" This struck a chord. Phones previously held up to record the drama were now being used for a different purpose. Thumbs flew across screens as investors sent frantic, coded messages to their teams. The narrative had shifted from a salacious affair to a question of leadership, of stability, of risk. "Julian likes to tell the story," Amelia continued, pacing the stage slowly, "of how he started Nexus Innovations in a dusty garage with nothing but a dream and a few $1,000s of his own money. It's a fantastic story. It's the myth of the self-made man, the narrative upon which his entire public persona is built. It's a powerful story." She stopped and looked directly at Julian. "And it is a complete and utter lie." Julian's blood ran cold. No, she wouldn't. He had buried that truth so deep, had rewritten history so effectively, that even he barely remembered it. "The truth," Amelia announced, her voice ringing with the clarity of a bell, "is that Nexus Innovations was born not in a garage, but in a lawyer's office. It was funded not by a few $1,000s, but by $50 million of seed capital. Money that did not come from a venture capitalist or a bank loan that recognized Julian's supposed genius. It came from a single source, my family's trust. The ballroom erupted. The low murmur exploded into a roar of conversation. Julian felt the floor tilt beneath his feet. This was a catastrophic blow, striking at the very heart of his carefully constructed legacy. He was not the self-made titan he claimed to be. He was a man who had been bankrolled by his wife's family. And my grandfather, Amelia's voice sliced through the noise, silencing the room once more, was a man who had seen his share of charlatans and opportunists. He believed in Julian's idea, but he was a shrewd judge of character. He saw the ambition, but he also saw the recklessness. So he insisted on a small, simple clause in the investment agreement. A safeguard. He called it his integrity clause. A morality clause. Julian stared at her, his mind a blank wall of white noise. Morality clause. The words barely registered. It was a faint, dusty memory, a piece of legal jargon he had dismissed as the ramblings of an old man irrelevant in the face of his inevitable success. The clause is very specific, Amelia explained as if lecturing a class. It states that in the event of a gross breach of personal and professional trust, an act of such profound betrayal and public infidelity that it brings shame upon our family name and by extension jeopardizes the ethical standing of the company. His money founded the controlling interest in the shares, purchased with that $50 million, automatically reverts to me. If the previous revelation had been a bombshell, this was a nuclear detonation. The implications were staggering. At the company's current valuation, that initial investment now represented a 40% stake in Nexus Innovations, not a minority share, a controlling interest. "You're lying!" Julian finally found his voice, a desperate, strangled cry. "That's not legal. It wouldn't hold up." "Oh, it's perfectly legal, Mr. Thorne, and it will hold up in any court in the world." The new voice was deep resonant and commanded immediate respect. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as a distinguished silver-haired man in an impeccably tailored suit made his way to the stage. It was Mr. David Chen, a titan of Asian finance, a man whose reputation for integrity was as legendary as his fortune. He was, as Julian knew, with a sinking feeling of absolute dread, the executor of Amelia's family estate. Mr. Chen ascended the stage and stood beside Amelia, placing a protective paternal hand on her shoulder. He looked at Julian, not with anger, but with a profound and heavy disappointment. "I was your father-in-law's closest friend and his personal attorney for 30 years. Mr. Chen said, his voice a low rumble of authority. "I personally drafted that clause. I advised him that while Julian was brilliant, his character was a high-risk investment. The clause was non-negotiable." He turned to the audience. "And as the executor of the estate, I have already filed the necessary paperwork with our legal teams. As of this moment, Miss Amelia Thorne is the majority shareholder and the controlling power of Nexus Innovations." The house of cards did not just collapse. It was annihilated. Julian stumbled backwards, his hand clutching his chest as if he'd been physically shot. He had lost his company. In the span of 10 minutes on the night that was meant to be his crowning glory, he had lost everything. He spun around his mind, searching for a target, for someone to blame other than himself. His wild eyes landed on Isabella. She was trying to back away, to melt into the shadows, her face a mask of pure terror. Her own scheme was unraveling her dreams of wealth and power, turning to ash. "Not so fast, Ms. Rossi." Mr. Chen's voice was like a whip crack. He held up a tablet, its screen glowing. It seems Mr. Thorne's catastrophic lack of judgment was not limited to his marriage. He addressed Julian directly. For the past 6 months, Nexus has been bleeding sensitive data, product roadmaps, R&D on our next-gen processors, confidential financial projections. We knew we had a mole, but we couldn't find the source. We suspected a high-level breach. He paused. We were wrong. The breach wasn't high-level. It was intimate. He turned the tablet to face Julian. On the screen was a decrypted communication log, a series of damning emails and texts between the account Bella Rossi and a senior executive at Aperture Dynamics Nexus Innovations' most ruthless competitor. It was a meticulous record of corporate espionage. Isabella had been seducing him for secrets, playing the part of the love-struck mistress while systematically gutting his company from the inside. Julian stared at the screen, then at Isabella. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, it was almost surreal. He had been a pawn in 2 different games and had lost them both. All the humiliation, all the rage, all the terror he felt coalesced into a single explosive point. "You!" he snarled, lunging towards her. "You did this!" 2 large security guards materializing as if from nowhere at Mr. Chen's subtle signal intercepted him, holding him back. Isabella shrieked, cowering away from him. "I did what you wanted!" she screamed back, her facade of sophistication shattering completely. "You wanted to be free. You wanted to be with me. I wanted a partner, not a viper who would sell me out to the highest bidder." Julian roared, struggling against the guard's iron grip. The scene had descended into sheer pandemonium. Paparazzi who had been held at the perimeter broke through the lines, their flashes exploding like a volley of gunfire. In the midst of the chaos, one of Mr. Chen's assistants, a stern-faced woman, walked calmly up to the sobbing Isabella. "I believe this belongs to Mr. Chen's client," she said coolly, and with practiced efficiency, she slid the Winston blue diamond from Isabella's finger. The cursed diamond was dropped unceremoniously into a simple evidence bag. That final act seemed to break something in Julian. The fight went out of him. His body went limp, and he sagged against the guards holding him up. His gaze was vacant, his face a hollow mask of utter devastation. He looked out at the sea of faces of former friends, colleagues, and investors, and saw nothing but contempt, pity, and the morbid fascination of strangers watching a spectacular car crash. He was no longer Julian Thorne, the tech visionary. He was a joke, a failure, a man who had built a glittering empire on a foundation of lies, only to see it all brought down by the 2 women he thought he could control. As the flashbulbs continued to pop, searing the image of his ruin onto the world's collective memory, he finally understood. This wasn't just the end of his career. It was the end of his life as he knew it. He stood on the brightly lit stage of his own, making a fallen king in a kingdom of rubble. Of course, here is a rewritten, significantly longer and more detailed version of Part 5, delving deeper into the aftermath and the characters' new realities. The sun that rose over Singapore the next morning seemed to Julian like a hostile, interrogating eye. He was huddled in the cavernous living room of his penthouse suite, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of a world that no longer felt like his. The silence of the suite was a physical presence, a heavy blanket smothering him, punctuated only by the incessant, angry buzzing of his phone on the marble coffee table. He hadn't slept. How could he? Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flash of cameras. The cold disappointment in Mr. Chen's eyes, the triumphant, chilling calm on Amelia's face. His world had been reduced to the glowing screen of a tablet in his trembling hands. The headlines screamed at him from every major news outlet on the planet. The Thorn betrayal, CEO loses billion-dollar empire in shocking gala proposal. Nexus in freefall. Wife seizes control after morality clause triggered the CEO and the spy. How a scorned wife uncovered a multi-billion-dollar espionage plot. Social media was a raging inferno. The hashtag #GeilerOffLies was trending globally. Memes of his devastated face were already viral. He was no longer a person. He was a spectacle, a cautionary tale for the ages his downfall consumed as entertainment by millions. He finally picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Amelia's name. He had called 37 times. He had sent 22 rambling, incoherent texts, a digital tapestry of apologies, accusations, and desperate pleas, all unanswered. The silence from her was more damning than any angry reply could ever be. Miles away in a serene, minimalist suite overlooking the gardens by the bay. Amelia was the picture of tranquility. She sat opposite Mr. Chen at a large mahogany table, sipping chamomile tea. Her phone was off. Spread before them were not tabloids, but corporate financial statements, legal documents, and a draft of a press release. There was no celebration, no gloating. There was only work to be done. The board is convening an emergency session via video conference at 0900. Mr. Chen said, his voice calm and steady. The motion to remove Julian as CEO and chairman is a formality at this point. They're terrified. The stock is projected to lose 60% of its value at opening bell. We need to halt trading, Amelia said, her voice clear and decisive. She had already shed the skin of the artist and donned the armor of a leader. We can't let panic dictate our value. We need to issue a statement immediately, one that reassures our employees and our real investors that Nexus is not Julian Thorn. It's bigger than him. Its future is secure. And what is that future, Amelia? Mr. Chen asked, watching her carefully. Amelia looked out the window, her hand resting protectively on her belly. My grandfather invested in an idea, David, an idea about connecting people. Julian turned that into a machine for accumulating wealth and power. He became obsessed with growth, with winning, and he lost sight of the why. The future of Nexus is in rediscovering that why. Technology with a conscience, innovation with integrity. That will be our story. Mr. Chen smiled a rare, genuine expression of pride. The old man would have been so proud of his granddaughter. She had not only inherited his fortune, she had inherited his wisdom. The weeks that followed were a brutal lesson in consequence for Julian. The emergency board meeting was a swift, bloodless execution. He appeared via a video link, a disheveled, hollowed-out version of himself, and listened in sullency as the people who had once hung on his every word voted unanimously to sever all ties with him. He was stripped of his titles, his stock options, his severance package. The company he had considered an extension of himself had surgically amputated him. His financial ruin was just as swift. Lawsuits from shareholders piled up, and his personal assets were frozen pending the litigation. The sprawling penthouse, the collection of vintage cars, the private jet, they were all just assets to be liquidated, bargaining chips in a game he had already lost. Friends who had once clamored for his attention now crossed the street to avoid him. He was radioactive. Isabella Rossi's downfall was even more public and pathetic. The images of her being led from her chic apartment in handcuffs, her face streaked with tears, were a stark counterpoint to the glamorous photos she had so carefully curated. Her bail was set at an impossibly high figure, and Aperture Dynamics, the company she had betrayed Nexus for, immediately disavowed any knowledge of her actions, leaving her to face the wolves alone. At her first hearing, her lawyer argued she was a pawn, a woman blinded by love. But the prosecution laid out the evidence of encrypted financial transactions and damning communications, painting a picture not of a lovelorn fool, but of a calculating and greedy operative. Her fantasy had ended in a beige-colored courtroom, her future to be decided by strangers. While their worlds imploded, Amelia's was expanding. She returned from Singapore and walked into the glass and steel headquarters of Nexus Innovations, not as the CEO's wife, but as its leader. A palpable tension hung in the air as she addressed the entire company in the main atrium. Employees who had known her only as a pretty face at holiday parties now looked at her with a mixture of fear, awe, and curiosity. "I know there is a lot of uncertainty right now," she began, her voice steady and sure, needing no podium or notes. "You read the headlines, you saw the drama, and you are right to be concerned. But I am not here to talk about the past. I am here to talk about our future." She laid out her vision with a passion and clarity that captivated the room. She spoke not of market caps and quarterly earnings, but of purpose, of building products that helped people, of creating a workplace culture free from the toxic, high-pressure ego that had defined Julian's reign. "For too long," she concluded, "this company has been a reflection of one man's ambition. From today, it will be a reflection of our collective integrity." She didn't receive a standing ovation. The shock was still too raw for that. But she earned something far more valuable, a flicker of hope, a glimmer of respect. The ensuing months were a period of quiet, intense transformation. Amelia, with Mr. Chen as her mentor, proved to be a natural leader. She was decisive, empathetic, and had an artist's eye for talent and potential where others saw only data points. She dismantled the boys' club culture, promoting talented women to leadership positions and fostering an environment of genuine collaboration. Nexus began to stabilize, then to heal. She sold the monstrous penthouse and bought a charming, light-filled house in a quiet, tree-lined suburb, a world away from the cold glamour of her former life. She turned one of the rooms into a nursery, painting murals of gentle animals and starry skies on the walls. In this sanctuary, she prepared for motherhood, finding a deep, quiet joy that had been absent from her life for so long. She was building a new life, a new company, and a new family, all on her own terms. Julian, meanwhile, existed in a self-imposed exile. The lawsuits were eventually settled, leaving him with a fraction of his former wealth, enough to live comfortably, but not enough to ever reclaim his place in the pantheon of the ultra-rich. He lived alone in a sterile, modern apartment, his days unstructured and empty. He read philosophy, he took long, aimless walks. He sat for hours, staring at the city that had once been his kingdom. For the first time in his life, with all the distractions stripped away, he was forced to confront the man in the mirror, and he didn't like what he saw. He saw the insecurity that had driven his ambition, the ego that had fueled his betrayal, the hollowness at the core of his being. A week before Amelia's due date, he sent her a single handwritten letter. It contained no excuses, no justifications. It was just a simple, humble request to see her one last time, to say what he needed to say in person. After 2 days of deliberation, she agreed. They met in a public park, a neutral ground beneath the gentle shade of old oak trees. Julian was already there, sitting on a bench, looking shockingly ordinary. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by simple trousers and a sweater. The predatory confidence had been replaced by a quiet, weary sadness. Amelia approached her steps, slow and steady, her large, round belly leading the way. She didn't sit down. "Julian," she said, her voice soft without malice. He stood up, his hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets. "Amelia, thank you for coming. You look beautiful, healthy." "I am," she replied simply. "I know I'm sorry isn't enough." He began, his voice hoarse, his gaze fixed on the ground. "I've said it to myself 1,000 times. What I did, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a failure of character, a failure of love. I was so terrified of being ordinary, of being second best, that I built this persona, this Julian Thorne, the visionary, and I started to believe it myself. I thought I needed something new and exciting to prove to the world and to myself that I was extraordinary." He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a profound, soul-deep regret. "And the whole time, the most extraordinary thing in my life was right in front of me. You, our life, our son. I had everything, and I burned it all to the ground for the sake of my own vanity. I didn't just betray you, Amelia. I betrayed myself. I destroyed the best man I ever was, the man you married." Amelia listened in silence, her expression unreadable. She had expected excuses, perhaps even a final attempt at manipulation. She had not expected this raw, painful honesty. "I know there's no going back," he continued, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "I don't deserve you. I don't deserve to be a father. But I had to tell you this. I had to let you know that I see it. I finally see it all." A long silence hung between them, filled only by the rustling of leaves and the distant laughter of children. "I'm glad you see it, Julian," Amelia said at last, her voice gentle but firm. "Not for my sake, but for yours. You have a long road ahead of you to figure out who you are without the money and the power." She took a breath. "Our son will be born next week. His name will be Theo, after my grandfather. He will know who his father is. I will show him pictures. I will tell him stories of the good times. I will not raise him on a foundation of anger." She took a step closer, her hand resting on her belly. "But he will also know the truth, not the sordid details, but the essential lesson. He will learn that integrity is the only currency that truly matters. He will learn that true strength is about kindness, not cruelty. And he will learn that a man's worth is measured by the promises he keeps. That will be your legacy to him, Julian. A lesson." She looked at him one last time, a flicker of the love that once was now transformed into a sad, distant compassion. "I forgive you, Julian. I have to, for my own peace and for Theo's. But forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things. Our story is over." With that, she turned and walked away, not looking back. She walked towards her future, towards her new life, towards the waiting arms of motherhood. Julian stood frozen, watching her go, until she was out of sight. He was alone, but for the first time he felt a flicker not of despair, but of something else. The devastating, painful, and necessary beginning of penance. The ashes of his old life were behind him, and before him a vast, empty landscape where perhaps something new and honest could finally begin to grow. And there you have it, a story that proves that hell hath no fury. Like a woman scorned, especially when that woman is smart, resourceful, and about to become the majority shareholder of her husband's company. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about avoiding heartbreak, but about how we rise from the ashes. It's a story of empowerment, of taking control of your own narrative, and of serving revenge, not hot, not cold, but with a controlling interest and a killer business plan. What did you think of Amelia's epic takedown? Was Julian's downfall deserved? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you love stories of drama, revenge, and ultimate triumph, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs a dose of empowerment, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories like this one. Click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Until next time, remember, don't get mad. Get everything.